Making the world a better place by listening to the Joy of Living podcast. This is your guide to achieving a more purposeful, powerful, and positive life. Join Barry Shore in unlocking the best version of you and becoming happier, healthier, and wealthier. And now, here's your ambassador of joy, Barry Shore.
Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. Remember, you're good-looking because you're always looking for and finding the good. That's the definition of a good-looking person. And you, Y-O-U, have consciously and conscientiously tuned into the Joy of Living podcast for one reason and one reason only. And that is because you care the most in the entire world about you. That's right, you, Y-O-U, E-W-E. And when you care most about you, you become the best you possible, you make a difference in the world. And that's really the key to living. Because you know, in this show, thank God, over 325,000 people tune in every week. And this week, I'm sure we'll be over the 350,000 mark because people encourage their friends to come and join the show as well. So thank you for being here. We are deeply touched, humbled, and honored. Your host, Barry Shore, and you've tuned into the Joy of Living consciously and consciously, purposely, because you know, in this show, we work with the three fundamentals of life. And the three fundamentals of life are, number one, your life has purpose. And when you lead a purpose-driven life, you can go mad. That's number two. Now, MAD is a great acronym that stands for make a difference. When you lead a purpose-driven life, you make a difference in the world. And number three, fundamental of life, is to unlock and uncover the power and the secrets of everyday words and terms. Simple example. www. Right now, this podcast is being carried over the internet, that magical, mystical, mythical platform that goes around the world, and people all over the world are listening and enjoying the podcast. And that's why you bring your friends and tell your friends, come, because you know that on this show, it's all about you. And as a result of listening to what we work with here, with the great guests that we have and the principles that we work with, that you will be happier, healthier, and wealthier. And who doesn't want that, right? Happier, healthier, wealthier. I'm in. That's why we're here. So just think, uncover the power and the secrets of everyday words and terms. Simple example, www. Ask anybody what www stands for, and very good it has something to do with the internet. And factually speaking, they're correct. But in our world, the world of the positive, purposeful, powerful, and pleasant, www stands for what a wonderful world. And what is a word, right? W-H-A-T-A. What a wonderful world. And of course, a big tip of the hat and a thank you to Louis Armstrong, Satchmo, for enabling that song to go viral and not just touch tens of millions or hundreds of millions, but billions of people around the planet. And whenever you hear even the opening bars of that song, what do right away? You can't help it. You smile. Smile is one of the greatest words you'll ever utilize, internalize, and leverage in your life, because SMILE is an acronym that stands for seeing miracles in life every day, every day. Here's a quick story. So pre-COVID, and by the way, just think about it. That panic, that pandemic, that's gone very soon. We'll be through that. You won't even remember in a couple of years. But pre-COVID, I was speaking to a group of people, about over 5,000 people in the audience. I'm telling the story about Barry Shore, and I'm talking about SMILE, seeing miracles in life every day. And people are raising their hands and shouting out, hey, Barry Shore, Barry Shore. I've been up for hours already. I haven't seen any miracles. And I asked them, are you here? Can you hear? Can you see? Can you stand? I can't. Can you walk? I can, only barely. You have water to drink, food to eat, a place to sleep, family, friends. Every single one of those is a miracle. And what's the proof? Simplest proof of all. 1 million people didn't get out of bed this morning. You know why? They died. By definition, if you're watching this, listening to this, you're alive. And if you're alive, you have an obligation to live exuberantly. So again, the three fundamentals: life has purpose. You lead a purpose-driven life. You go mad. You make a difference and uncover the power and the secrets of everyday words and terms. Wait a minute, I got to tell you a funny story. My 8-year-old niece comes over to me a few weeks ago. She says, Uncle Barry, can we spell smile S-M-I-E-L? I thought about it. Smile. It sounds the same. Why not? And I asked her, how come? She says, because then it would stand for seeing miracles in everyday life. Out of the mouth of babes, 8-year-old. But what was she doing? She was creating the kind of world she wants to live in. Now, CREATE is a fabulous acronym. It stands for causing rethinking, enabling all to excel. Rethinking. We have the power of our own thinking process called neuro-linguistic programming. Thank God you have a brain. You have a brain, you have 100 billion brain cells and 120 trillion synapses connecting all those brain cells. And they're more they're there than just to decide what kind of latte you want this morning. The ability to do neuro-linguistic programming and to choose your response in life. The 6 most important words you'll ever hear, you'll ever learn are choice, not chance, determines your destiny. Now, I need to warn you in advance before we bring on our wonderful guest, who I'm so honored and humbled to have to share with you. Before we bring him, I want to warn you that your humble host, Barry Shaw, does use a lot of 4-letter words. Now, of course, we live in the world of positive, purposeful, powerful, and pleasant. So our 4-letter words are love, life, hope, grow, free, gift, pray, play, swim. 4-letter words. I urge you to use, and I even use the 4-letter FU word, and I do it for the shock value, and it's fun. Now, of course, the 4-letter FU word that we use is fun. Fun, yes. F-U, capital N, capital N. I see right away, people say, Barry Shaw, fun's only spelled with 3 letters. Not in our world. The world of the positive, purposeful, powerful, and pleasant. Fun is spelled F-U, capital N, capital N. So after the show, when you see your family, your friends, you have a twinkle in your eye and you have a smile on your face. Remember what that stands for. You point your finger, say, F-U, everybody. They say, what are you talking about? Add immediately, capital N, capital N. Say, where'd you get that? So I listen to Barry Shaw and The Joy of Living. He wants to teach the world to F you. Capital N, capital N. It begins a conversation. You can talk about joy, happiness, peace, and love. So before we bring on our guest, just want to urge everybody to do the following. I want you to use the 2 most powerful words in the English language and use them 3 times a day, consciously and conscientiously, for the rest of your life. You do this, these 2 words, you're going to change your physiology. You're going to change that of your family, your friends, and the whole world, because the energy that you bring forth with these 2 words will change the world when you do them consciously and conscientiously. These 2 words are, drum roll, fanfare, da-da, da-da. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank stands for to harmonize and network kindness. To harmonize and network kindness. I've read in his writings that Dalai Lama has been quoted as saying, be kind whenever possible. As he said, it's always possible. So imagine going to the coffee shop, no mask, and it's all over. All that stuff is gone. Walk in the coffee shop, you order your fancy latte for $5, you sit down, and somebody brings it to you. You say, thank you. You go into the coffee shop, you order your fancy latte, $5, you sit down, a few minutes go by, nobody brings it to you. You go to the counter, and they say, well, I'm sorry, we're busy, we'll bring it to you. Go to sit down, a couple of minutes go by, somebody brings it to you, you still say, thank you. Imagine you're walking out of the coffee shop, it's raining out. Somebody holds the door open for you. You say, thank you. You're walking out of the coffee shop, it's raining out. Somebody slams the door on you. You say, thank you. You're in traffic, you're late for an appointment, somebody cuts you off. You say, thank you. You get up in the middle of the night, you stub your toe and it hurts. You say, thank you. To harmonize and network kindness. KIND is a wonderful acronym that stands for Keep Inspiring Noble Deeds. I can't think of anybody that I'd like to share with you that inspires noble deeds in the world than the one, the only, Brad Schaefer. Brad, please say hello to 352,722 people around the world.
723 if my wife tunes in. So How are you?
Okay, big hello.
Hello. How are you? Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Well,
Brad,
welcome to my office.
When was the last time somebody said F you to you and you laughed?
Well, I'm in the commodities trading business, so that's sort of part of the vernacular.
Yeah, but now you're going to tell them F you, capital N, capital N.
Yes, I'm going to try the kindness approach on them. I think they could use a little bit of that. So,
well, that is the reason, or one of the reasons why I asked Brad to join us, and he has made the time to do so, and I'm really glad of it. I don't want to read all of Brad's bio because it takes too long, but suffice it to say, in my humble opinion, he's an extraordinary being. And part of the reason is because he's ordinary in the sense that he has a life, he has a wife, he has kids, but he's been through a lot of stuff. And the ability to go through stuff on one level really makes a person better because he understands that the greatest university is called adversity. And because of that adversity, he was able to channel his energies into not only singing and playing instrument, but in doing something that really can touch people to the very core. And that's called writing. So I want to discuss today more about the two books that Brad has penned. We'll use that term, even though nobody uses the pen anymore, although you may have done it when you're doing longhand. I don't know if you do longhand or you do typing. We'll see. But the point is that Brad has written, we'll call it a novel, but it's really not. But it's a novel idea. And it intersects with many points in his life, and certainly in my life, as I mentioned to him. So, Brad, let's just jump in and speak about, first of all, for the title of the book, which is called The Extraordinary, or as I like to call it, The Extraordinary,
right,
and how it seeks to give voice to two very poignant, powerful processes that exist in the world and have touched you and me, and they are autism and PTSD. So let's start by asking you, the author, to weave the story and bring out some of the relevance for people who may have no idea what autism is about or PTSD, because we have a worldwide audience, mostly under 38.
Right. Well, as you alluded to, or as you would allude to, I've actually have personal experience with dealing with PTSD because of my father, who was a Marine in the Korean War, and he was a hardcore combat veteran. I mean, he was wounded in action and whatnot. So he was the Saving Private Ryan type of experience. And he came home, and of course, and for 30 years he really struggled with PTSD. And for those who have not really experienced it, it is basically you can't leave something behind. It always kind of stays with you, and I think a lot of it has to do with seeing such traumatic events at a young age, things that I certainly can't imagine. So for me,
let me interrupt just for one moment,
Sure.
because part of what happens when we talk about terms and we use an acronym,
Okay.
Let's unpack what PTSD stands for.
Sure.
And then, as you said, here's a young man, a Marine, hardcore in the sense that capable of leaping buildings in a single bound. But let's talk about what it means, what PTSD means, and what's going on.
Sure. It's a modern terminology. It means post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's basically the carrying with you after the fact of some very traumatic event. It doesn't always have to be in combat. It can be in some traumatic event that you've dealt with that you just can't seem to shake. And in his case, it would sort of haunt his dreams. It would, I think it would affect him mentally. And it was also because he was in command of a platoon. So he had other men in responsibility underneath him. And as anyone who knows history about the Korean War will know, the 1st Marine Division was in the thick of it. So back then they called it battle fatigue. In World War I, they called it shell shock. But it's all sort of the same mental disorder that you see. And one of the reasons I wanted to write about it, and I moved the story to Iraq, is because I wanted to make it more modern and more accessible to people now dealing with it. And we have many, many veterans, millions literally, who've come home from these wars not just broken in body, but even if they look fine in body, their minds are often there. And so I feel and having seen it myself firsthand for 16 years, I have a definite affinity for those who suffer that and for those who live with it as well. It's a very helpless feeling sometimes, because what can I say to a man who's been in combat? What do I know? I mean, for me, the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me is I fell off my bike. Right. So thank God.
He
far.
scraped, by the way, he scraped his knee and he still remembers it.
Oh yeah. It was horrible. It was terrible.
Okay.
My mom sprayed some Bactine on it. I was fine. So.
I want to unpack a couple of things,
Sure.
because usually in the beginning of the show, I mention about the story of Barry Shore. So I just alluded to it. So I want to put it now in context of what you just said, because I want to talk about trauma. And I want to go deeper into it, because that's what the book does. And it does it in such a gripping way. So imagine standing up in the morning, fully capable, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, and that evening be in the hospital totally, completely paralyzed. That was me. And it was not for an automobile accident. It was not a spinal injury. It was a rare disease that I didn't even hear of the day before. And overnight, I became a quadriplegic. Now, quadriplegic means somebody who's nothing on their body moves, except I could barely turn my head left to right. I was 144 days in the hospital. I was in a hospital bed in my own home for 2 years. I couldn't turn over by myself. I was 4 years in a wheelchair. I had braces on both my legs, from my hips to my ankles, and that was progress. Today, thank God, I'm able to be vertical and ambulatory with the help of a 7-foot walking wand. But so I'm a triped, not a biped. I can't walk up a stair by myself. I can't walk up a curb by myself. And I have help 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. But you hear my voice: positive, purposeful, powerful, and pleasant.
Right.
So I've experienced trauma. The genius of what I've had because of the situation is I was able to let go of the trauma and enter into the world of positive, purposeful, powerful, and pleasant, and use it. However, I can't even imagine the trauma of war and witnessing the horrors of war, whether on oneself, like you say, being wounded. And we're not talking about falling off a bike and scraping one's knee. We're talking about taking something into the body called shrapnel or a bullet or something.
Right.
But even more so, even more horrifying, seeing others that you have a close relationship with either be killed or wounded to such a degree that their lives are completely, totally shattered. Right. And I think that's part of what you communicate so well and lived with in your father.
Right. And I think a lot of it had to do also with the responsibility of being in charge of others, and whenever one of them would get killed or wounded, feeling like you've let them down, even though we know there's nothing you can do. But that's sort of the mark of a commander. A commander cares about his troops and he cares about his people. And I tried to show that as well, that a lot of in the book, which as your audience may or may not know, is about a family dealing with PTSD, but the story is told through the eyes of an autistic boy, which I imagine we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah, I'm just going to hold it up only because, sure. 1 second. It's called The Extraordinary, right? And the picture on the book is it's quite extraordinary.
So yeah, I love that. I love that cover. Simon Schuster and Postal did a great job with that. Yeah.
Let's start the process. So who is let's not call him the hero, but who's the narrator of the story, right? And what is it about him that makes it so interesting for us?
Well, the narrator of the story is a 14-year-old boy named Wes Scott, who is on the autism spectrum. And as we know, I will say I do not have any children myself on the autism spectrum, but part of the reason why I wanted to tell the story is I have so many friends, and I've seen it firsthand so many times. And I also, when I was in high school, I worked at a place in Palatine, Illinois called Little City for the Mentally Handicapped, which is not the same as autism, I know. But I've always sort of cared about those who see the world in a different way, either through some sort of a syndrome or just through some sort of marked intelligence or whatnot. So I wanted to tell the story about an autistic boy, but I wanted to do it, and I wanted to present him into a situation that is really extraordinary for him. And so for me, I developed Wes's relationship is closest with his father. He has a mother and he has 2 older siblings, and they don't quite get him, I mean, for different reasons, which you see a lot in some families, right? And the only man who really gets him, who really contacts with him, connects with him, is his father. And it's the only one that he feels an affinity for. And when his father goes away, he's very confused and he's trying to process all this. And then even more so when the father comes back wounded, not just in body, but definitely his mind has changed and his attitude about life has changed. And the reason it's called The Extraordinary, as you alluded to before as well, is that his father calls him my extraordinary boy. And he has a term he tries to make Wes feel special by saying, listen, they're the ordinary kids. He calls them the ords, but you are my X-Man. You're my extraordinary boy. And he eventually calls him, you're my favorite Marine, which to a Marine, to call someone a Marine who's not one is quite a thing. I never felt comfortable wearing a USMC shirt, even though my dad was a Marine, because I was not one. My brother was in the Navy and he went through Marine ROTC, so he could. So the fact that the father gives him the moniker of you're my favorite Marine just shows you how close they are. And when the father does come back, when Captain Peter Scott does come back, the family is having a very difficult time processing all this. And a lot of those are based on what I saw when my father, he didn't come back from war. He just kind of lived with it for 30 years. But, the story really is not just about Wes, but it's really about the whole Scott family, but told through the eyes of Wes and told through his unique perspective in the first person as a boy on the spectrum, as I imagine one might process the world. And as you know, there are it's called the spectrum for a reason, because there are an infinite number of manifestations of it. So I tried to create mine, which was a quiet, introverted boy, prone to violence sometimes when he gets frustrated, but also extremely intelligent and extremely astute and extremely observant of the world around him. And in many ways, the smartest person in the family.
So let's discuss it again, unpack a number of pieces. Mm-hmm. And again, part of the reason that I am really overjoyed, I am the ambassador of joy, but I am overjoyed today to have Brad with us and to share. And I mentioned to him before the show that the number of pieces that intersect for me personally. So I am blessed to have 2 younger sisters. I'm the firstborn in my family, boy. 2 younger sisters. My youngest sister, who to me is still 8 years old, even though she's 60 something now. So she has 4 daughters, oldest daughter, youngest daughter, and twins. The twins are both autistic on the spectrum, which, by the way, is highly unusual in the sense that girls are less prone to be autistic than boys, and to have twin girls who are both autistic is extraordinary.
That is very interesting. Yeah.
So I would call firsthand knowledge, but it's really not. It's secondhand knowledge because they're my nieces. Mm-hmm. My sister, of course, has and her husband have firsthand knowledge, and they are very much like you said, by the way, quiet, introverted, prone to violence in the sense of frustration. Mm-hmm. Remarkably observant and sensitive. So these 2 are different parts of the spectrum. So I'm just going to make mention, because I want you to be able to work with this, is that one of them, I won't give their names, but one of them has been able to use, and I don't know how my sister even discovered this, what's it called? Equine therapy. So that's a fancy way of saying she actually works with horses, but she doesn't just work with horses. She has learned to ride, and she does, I forget what it's called in England, in America, but it's like dressage. So you can look up dressage, but it's not. It's an American version of dressage. So this petite girl who's now 34, 35, wears the garb of somebody competing with other people with this magnificently large horse that she's able to get on with the English saddle and the whole thing. And with a mare, the way you have to work with the horses, you have to hold reins in one hand, both the reins, and with a mere movement of a wrist, command the horse to move to the left, move to the right, to do a trot, to do a canter, whatever it is. And this remarkable, interesting being who, not on the horse, if you tried to communicate with her, it would be difficult. When she's in that world, she's in control. And she competes with all people, not people who have issues, with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes she wins. May not win first place, but she'll be second or third in a field of 30.
Wow, that's impressive.
That's
really is.
remarkably so. The other one, my other niece, when you say these things and it becomes almost sort of, well, of course, yeah, like that. She's so sensitive. She has been hired by a family, happens to be a wealthy family, that has 2 younger children, and she's the nanny. They don't know she's autistic because my sister never told them. And it sort of doesn't matter. If it did, psychologically, they might say something. But she works with these children and is so able to shape and mold and help them that you would think that she's been trained in one of the finest schools in the world for interacting, with an advanced degree in psychology to be able to work with them. And yet when she's not with them, introverted, and they can only speak to each other, these two, the twins. I mean, they speak to my sisters, right. But it's not, they can't have long-term conversations. So I want to bring that to the fore because now Wes, who has all of these factors in him, somewhere on the spectrum, is interacting with father who has been to war. Mm-hmm. See, there's no greater, how should we call it? There's no greater sense of reality than either love or war. And I dare say, unfortunately, I'm going to go on the limb when I say this, Brad. In today's world, it's very difficult to touch either one. I mean, there are very few people in America who go to war.
Right. I agree. And
very few people know how to love.
Well, that I can speak more to the war part than the love part, but in terms of just because there are statistics with people who go to war, there aren't with people who love. Although I think the state of the world certainly would add credence to your theory there. I do think in this particular book, love is sort of the vehicle that pushes them through the. I might be mixing metaphors, but pushes them through the crucible to the other side. It really is this family doesn't realize how much they love each other until they're really faced with a tragedy of epic proportions. As your readers will find out, and I do think that without love, you really, what's the point, right? I mean, what's the point of anything?
That's, by the way, I was hoping you would say that, because that's part of the point in the message of the book.
Right. Well, I mean, you can, as you know, from being in a family, I'm in a big family. You don't always like each other, and you have issues with each other. And certainly the family, especially the teenage boy who was a little bit like me, actually. I'm a little bit more like the teenage boy because he was around 17, and he feels like Wes, the younger, is taking all the air out of the room. He's like, look, I've got college coming up, I've got SATs, and everybody just cares about Wes all the time because he's very needy and he needs to be dressed and whatnot. But you do see as it goes through it, he moves from resentment to really loving his brother. And then what happens is they discover, like you're talking about with your nieces, they discover these incredible gifts he has, and they start to see him in a new and different and much more respectful light. And I'd like to think, there are some difficult scenes in the book, and because life can be difficult, and people are people, and people make mistakes, and people do things that they regret. I mean, Lord knows I have. But in the end, I think you will walk away from this hopefully realizing that, like you said, it might be cliche, but the greatest thing of all is love. And without it, this family certainly could not have made it through the other side. And, to this day, I still feel love for my father. He's been gone, good Lord, almost 40 years. And I still feel a positive feeling towards him. And I still hold the memories, as brief as they were, I still hold them very dear to me. And I think
I want to go to a very sensitive part about you, which, of course, a book, almost by definition, has part of autobiography in it. That's how you write it.
Right.
I want to tell everybody, and I'm going to keep you on the edge of your seat, because we're going to come back. We're going to discuss another book of Brad's and what he does and such, and how relevant it is to the world. But at the tender age of 16, and just a few days after his birthday, Brad's father, who had been wrestling, fighting with PTSD for almost 3 decades, couldn't hold on anymore and committed suicide.
That's right.
Brad was 16. On that note, that high note, I'm going to go to a commercial break. We'll be right back because there's more extraordinary Brad Schaefer on the other side. And these interesting sponsors, I think you'll find also very fascinating. So listen in, and we'll be right back because Brad Schaefer commands our attention. Hi, everybody. You know the story of Barry Shore, standing up in the morning, hale and hearty in the evening, completely, totally paralyzed. And I was like that for several years. You can imagine the difficulties I faced mentally, not just physically. And it's the mental aspect that was the most debilitating and the most frightening. And I got to tell you, it wasn't easy to speak to somebody. And I did. I finally did. I spoke to several people over the course of a number of years, and it helped immensely. And I know that it's hard to talk about these things. By the way, did you know that suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States for all ages? About 21 million American adults have a mood disorder, and especially with depression and bipolar, there's an ability to get help. That's the genius of what we're talking about here. There is help available from what's called the dbsalliance.org. I want to tell you a couple other things. Over 47,000 Americans died by suicide in 2019. Over 47,000. And middle-aged white males have the highest rate of suicide, counting for almost 70% of all deaths by suicide. On average, about 130 suicides every day. Every day. I urge you, please get involved for yourself, for a friend, for a family member, for someone you know that may have issues. I want you to go, please, to dbsalliance.org/suicide-prevention. Okay, it sounds like a lot, but I'm going to repeat it again, and you're going to hear it. You're going to see it on the screen. D as in David, B as in Barry, S as in Samuel, Alliance, dbsalliance.org/suicide-prevention, because we can prevent. Please do so now. Imagine the kind of place you would want to shop for your favorite fur baby pet. HonestPets.co. Well, you found it. HonestPets.co. Not .com, .co. This is your go-to spot for the best, the cleanest pet treats that exist anywhere on the planet. All of the brands go through a rigorous review to make sure they meet the high standards of cleanliness, health benefits, and naturalness. This site was started by a husband and wife team, and it's veteran-owned, and that care about pets, especially dogs and cats, and coming soon, bird treats. These are very nice young people who really care about making a difference, because a portion of proceeds go to support veteran organizations with a focus on service dogs. This is the place where you want to go. You want to tell your friends this has the finest, yummiest, freshest, all-natural treats and stuff for your fur baby. So go there, honestpets.co. honestpets.co. Do it now. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. Remember, you're good-looking because you're always looking for and finding the good. We have good in abundance. Our cup runneth over with good in the form of a being, two-legged being named Brad Schaefer. He is an author. He is a guitarist. He's a classical pianist. Wow, interesting how they go together. He's a commodities trader. He's a husband. He's a father. He's a son. And he has given us a great gift in something called The Extraordinary. And I urge everybody to get a copy of it wherever you can. And everything you want to know about Brad and all the things that he does, you just go to my website, www.whatawonderfulworld.barryshore.com, and everything about Brad is going to be there. You don't have to write anything down. Just lean in and let this wonderful being bring us the transformational insights that he's doing by the story of the extraordinary, not the ordinary, but the extraordinary Wes, and how he sees what happens with his father, how he deals with it, and the pain that comes out of it, and the emergence through love of the great phoenix that enables the family to come together despite tragedy. And it is tragic. And yet it's what Brad lived through himself. At the tender age of 16, he saw his beloved father leave this world through suicide. It's a very difficult situation because that's what life is. Life stands for living inspirationally for eternity. And that's what Brad is doing by writing. He is giving us a glimpse of eternity. So I want to talk about your other book, because I also find it fascinating on so many levels. First of all, it's titled Of Another Time and Place. It has to do also with the midst of war and the midst of struggle. Here we're talking about a psychological struggle between good and evil within a human being. And it's really, for me, quite personal because, as everybody knows, I'm Jewish. And the situation in today's environment, now this is the year 2021, and I'm saying it specifically because what we're doing today, Brad, could be viewed a decade from now, half a century from now, a century from now, a millennium from now. So we're going to put it in space and time. In this particular time, 2021, there is an emergence of the oldest, most debilitating poison in the world. It's called anti-Semitism, more specifically, anti-Judaism. The hatred of Jews has been going on for thousands of years. It manifested itself in the most horrible way during a period of time, let's say from 1933 to 1945, which is talked about as the Nazi era. But it was also a unique situation throughout Europe where anti-Semitism turned itself into killing, hunting down Jews just because they're Jewish. It's hard to imagine. And yet what's happening is there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism, anti-Judaism, hating of Jews, specifically today around the country called Israel. One of the smallest countries in the world, the size of New Jersey, where you live, Brad, the size of New Jersey. Imagine if New Jersey was in the world press 4 times a week, and all the things that were written about it were hateful. How horrible New Jersey is, and terrible, and all the people who live in New Jersey, get rid of them. They're no good. They took over the land from the original Indians, or whoever lived there. You know,
right?
It's hard to imagine, and yet, so Brad has written a book about a struggle, but I'd rather you talk about it, Brad, please.
Sure. It's called Of Another Time and Place, and it sort of really takes my love of history, particular military history, but also my fascination with World War II and what happened in Germany. I mean, quite frankly, it's one of the most interesting and diabolical stories in human history. And so what it is about is a German fighter pilot who really aspires to be a concert pianist. So again, there's the autobiography in there. You know, they say write about what you know. And so, and his name is Harman Becker. He becomes a captain in the Luftwaffe, but it's also about his life before the war. And he really is one of those Germans who, he's not a hardcore Nazi, like his younger brother is caught up in the Hitler Youth, right? Nor is he an anti-Nazi like his fiance Amelia, so who becomes sort of the real moral protagonist of the story. So he represents that group of Germans who, to me, was the most frightening of all, because they were so indifferent, and there's so much indifference to anti-Semitism today. And so I tried to get into his mind and explain how it is that a guy who wants to be a concert pianist can end up flying a German fighter plane with the swastika on the tail and attacking, American bombers and whatnot. And so he kind of explains how he slowly but surely became not really enamored with Hitler, but saying things like, well, yeah, the guy seems kind of crazy, but the trains do run on time. And then he starts to fall into that. Well, I'm in this little Bavarian village, which I based on this wonderful village I stayed in, by the way. Excuse me. That must have been my email.
So wait, you actually played in that village?
No, I didn't play. But I started writing. I started taking notes. I wrote the town. I made it the little town of Stauffenberg, which I named as an homage to Colonel Stauffenberg, who tried to kill Hitler.
Right.
Played by Tom Cruise in the movie Valkyrie. And so I was, he's like, well, I'm in this little Bavarian village, and the only people I know who are Jewish is my piano teacher. Maybe they are worse in this city. I don't know, and that's sort of what happens. You become marinated in it to the point where you don't really realize where you are until you look back and see where you've been. And his fiance is older by 2 years, and she's not buying any of it. She knows that Hitler's a fraud. She knows he's a terrible man. And one of the hardest scenes for me to write was the scene where Harmon basically visits his piano instructor, who he loves, who's been teaching him piano for years, and says, "I can't associate with you anymore." And it's a very sad story. And he's also saying, you've got to get out of here. You don't understand. And the poor piano teacher doesn't understand what's coming. He's still, he's a German. Yeah, he happens to be Jewish, but he's a German.
Wait a minute, Brad. This is so important what you're saying. Again, we have a worldwide audience. Okay. Tens of thousands of people from India, whole subcontinent, China, throughout Africa and Europe, obviously United States, Latin America, and mostly under 38. So they have very little knowledge of history, I'm sorry to say. They have very little knowledge of geography. And what Brad is telling us is that the people who we're talking about, who were hunted, who were martyred, who were put in concentration camps, who were in the gas chambers and burned afterwards, they had no idea because they said, no, I'm a German. Right. Yes, my religion is Jewish. But they didn't understand the power of hate.
Right. And the terminology, and I forget the actual dialogue of it, it's in the book. The terminology is Harmon starts referring to his piano instructor as a Jew and not as a German. And he doesn't even realize it. And what happens is, though, he has a moral catharsis, and he discovers that he starts to realize, like, the Nazi lie starts to unwind to him as he's flying these missions. And part of it is because he takes personal losses. Part of it is because he actually goes and meets Hitler and is given the Iron Cross, the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. And he meets him in person, and he's like, wait a minute, this maniac is the man that I've been flying for. So he starts to realize that he's living a lie. And then he makes and again, here's where you were talking, Barry, about love before. It's one thing to say, okay, you know what? I've been fighting for a lie. This is wrong, but they're bombing my country. And so now I'm going to fight for my family. I'm now going to protect my family from bombs. I'll worry about why they're bombing later. But what makes a man commit treason, which is really what this is about? This is about a man who goes from being a good soldier, if not a committed Nazi, to basically committing treason by trying to save the Jews in his neighborhood, sort of Schindler's List meets 12 O'Clock High. And what makes him do that is the love he feels for Amelia, who he realizes is his soulmate. And you learn at the very beginning they are married for the rest of their lives. And so again, it seems like these stories that I try to write, which is why I really find your show wonderful, is because love is really the bass note of the symphony that goes through all of these stories that I write. Because you can't get through what I went through with my father without loving him. You can't go from being a good soldier to committing treason, knowing that a firing squad or worse awaits you if you get caught, without love. Love, in this case, love for his piano teacher and his family, love for his fiance, who has seen the light and always saw the light. She never bought into Hitler, and even love for his father, who also was a soldier in the First World War and just saw Hitler and the Nazis as nothing more than a recreation of just the barons of old. They're thugs with a different uniform, is the way he sees it. And so I do think without that underlying theme of you do it for love, I don't think these stories could have been written. And I'd like to think that they are some sort of a reflection of how I look at the world.
And I would dare say that not only how you look at the world, but that beings such as these, unique. See, this is also extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
You see, in the extraordinary, Wes is a unique being because of his situation, which we call autism.
Mm-hmm.
Harmon is a unique being. He's extraordinary because he comes through the struggle on a different plane.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse the pun, fighter pilot.
I see what you did.
But through a different plane, but also through the harmonics, using Harmon, the
mm-hmm.
harmonics of love. See, love stands for living on vibrating energy.
Yep.
Living on the vibrational plane. When you're not in the vibrational plane, then you can get caught up in hatred and be involved and get dark. Right. The vibrational plane allows someone to potentially see the light, like Amelia does, mm-hmm. and to evolve, which, by the way, the word evolve has the word love in it. Mm-hmm. I love words, as do you. And the ability now to reckon and say, what I'm about to do is called treason in this environment, but this environment is dark. This environment is wrong. This environment is evil.
Right.
And therefore, I can move the T from treason, and I use reason and love to rise above it. And I'm telling you, Brad, as you tell the story, I'm shedding a tear and crying. And part of it, again, is what Brad is doing is giving us a glimpse of what was, and he's also giving us a glimpse of what is. There is a poison that exists in the world. It's called anti-Semitism. Agreed. It does take on different, like you said, thugs with a different uniform. Right. In America today, let's say it's hard to say the words. It's more represented by a person like a Bernie Sanders or a George Soros, who are born Jewish, or the heads of Black Lives Matter, who espouse some sort of communal love, and yet their whole being is rooted in, as they say, communism and the hatred of anything that has to do with Western civilization, which they consider, like the Nazis did, Judaism. One of the reasons that Hitler said, we hate Jews, you know why? Because they gave the world a conscience.
Right.
We don't like that kind of stuff. We're here to push through and break down everything. Breaking down is not beneficial.
Like, everybody needs a scapegoat too, and Jews are easy picking. You know, if you took every Jew in the world, they would fit in the city of Istanbul. People don't realize how few Jews there are in the world, and so it's easy to pick on them. And also, I think there's a bit of, for lack of a better term, jealousy. I mean, business, science, education, the arts. They're literally, Sam Harris made the point. He said there are literally zip codes in Massachusetts that have given more to the world in 1,000 years, or I'm sorry, in the last 100 years, than parts of the world have given to it, in their entire existence.
Right.
And the thing to me that I found so fascinating about World War II, I think C.S. Lewis, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but he basically said,
I specifically printed it out.
Yeah, you know the quote, right? That the evil is done.
Should I read it? Please, should I read the whole thing?
Yes, please.
Only because, Brad, I so love you that I needed to print it out because I wanted to articulate it. If I could, I would have put it on the screen, but I wasn't prescient enough.
I almost included this quote in the foreword of my book.
Okay, so here we go. I'm going to read it to everybody. And again, I want you to listen to this show again and share it with at least 5 people. That means 1.5 million people will be touched by this. But C.S. Lewis himself, a remarkable being.
Right. An atheist who became a born-again Christian.
Right, because he understood. He saw the light.
Saw the light.
So the greatest evil is not now done in those sordid dens of crime like Dickens loved to paint. It is not done even in concentration camps and labor camps. In those we see its final result, but it is conceived and ordered, moved, seconded, carried, and minuted in clean, carpeted, warmed, and well-lighted offices by quiet men with white collars and cut fingernails and smooth-shaven cheeks who do not need to raise their voices.
He may well have just been talking about the Wannsee Conference, right? In 1942.
I urge everybody to listen to the show again, and this all has a transcript. So Brad, as a historian, is giving us an insight into something which I would dare say 99.8% of the entire listening audience has never heard of it. Wannsee Conference, WANSEE Conference. You should look it up. I think there's a video, there's a YouTube, or there's a movie that was made about it.
Yeah, there's a movie. Shoot, I forget what it's called, but it's with Kenneth Branagh and plays Reinhard Heydrich, and I forget the actor. One of my favorite actors. I'm just having a mental block. Who plays Eichmann? And
right, it is so powerful that you won't believe it. See, this is where it gets to that word unbelievable, and not in the common parlance.
Right,
you can't. It's hard to believe that human beings would sit around a table with clean clothes and manicured fingernails cut and such, and discuss the liquidation of beings
with the same amount of emotion as they would discuss, just expanding a factory of widgets. It's very frightening. And there's a scene in Of Another Time and Place when Eric, I'm sorry, I keep calling him Eric for some reason, a friend of mine, when Harmon is speaking with Leo, his piano instructor, and when he's telling him, listen, you need to get out of here. This is around 1938, 39. He's going off to join the Luftwaffe, right? And everybody knows war is coming, like anybody. And he says, you've got to get out of here. You don't understand the hatred that you're facing. He's like, this is my country. He's like, it's not your country anymore. This is not the Germany, And Leo points to his star that they had to wear, right? That they were and he says, I refuse to believe that the country that gave us Beethoven, that gave us Bach,
Goethe,
they gave us all these beautiful things. I refuse to believe that they could also do this. And he's like, well, you better believe it. And I think it was Douglas Murray said, he ended a speech one time. He was talking about the Holocaust. And he said, remember, just when people tell you they want to annihilate you, believe them because they mean it. And I think that is the lesson of the Holocaust. And that's part of the reason I wrote this book, is to say, look, this takes place in 1938 to 1944, and then in the present day. But you could take these emotions, you could take these feelings, and you could put them into the here and now. Just change the names, change the players. Anti-Semitism is a very insidious, and it's like a virus that never seems to go away, which I can't understand, especially when juxtaposed. I'm Catholic, by the way, so especially when juxtaposed against all the good that we have seen in, like I said before, in business, science, education, the arts. Think of all the wonderful,
the ultimate literature, the Bible,
the ultimate literature. I mean, the music that we listen to.
Right.
And I don't understand it, but the human heart is very hard to understand, and I guess that's at the core of my books as well, trying to understand what makes people tick. And in the end, you realize sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you just have to confront things as they are and not as you wish they would be.
And we all need to have Amelia in our lives.
Oh yeah, absolutely, because she always saw the truth. And I had said in an interview a while back that I actually wish I had written more about her, because it started off being a war story. It started off, I just wanted to write a story about flying ace because I'm interested in aviation. But then I realized I wanted to make it mean more. And then I introduced Amelia as the moral bulwark of the story. And afterwards, I was like, this really should have been more about their relationship, and maybe one or two less combat scenes. Although there's some pretty interesting combat scenes. If you're ever wondering what it was like to be on the receiving end of those bombers that had interlocking fields of fire. But one German ace wrote, every time I climb into my cockpit and close the lid of my canopy, I feel like I'm closing the lid to my coffin. I mean, these guys were terrified too. And another guy said, if you curve into 40 B-17 fortresses, he goes, your past sins flash before you. So these guys were scared too. So I wanted to write about that. But again, I didn't want to make it look like I was rooting for them. So this was a good vehicle to do it, I thought.
So we're not going to end on this note. We're going to end on a different note. But by the same token, I want to emphasize what Brad said. If people say they want to annihilate you, believe them. So when tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people chant, let's say, death to America in the streets of Iran, and then death to Israel, they are not singing a popular song.
Right.
What they are doing is they are chastening their hearts to be able to celebrate that situation. Not necessarily everybody in the country, but certainly a population that has been nursed with hatred and led by hatred wants to cause death and destruction. That's on a grander scale. We see it, by the way. It's hard to even talk about what happened in Afghanistan, and that a group of people that are fanatically dedicated to hurting people, to killing people, to annihilating a Western ideal now controls a country, and they've been armed to the teeth and worse by Americans. It's a fight.
My tax dollars.
Brad, if you wrote the book, they tell you, get out of here. It's too weird. It's not going to happen. And again, to go to ground zero in Israel, to have neighbors on both sides of a tiny place that's not even the size of New Jersey surrounding this country saying, we hate you, we want to kill you, and therefore you can't have peace. Because in the charters of both of those groups, it says, first and foremost, get rid of the Jews.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to make...
I mean, hello.
Somebody said, listen, we're going to sit down with you, Brad, but our first order of business is to kill you. I'd be like, okay, well, maybe we don't have much to talk about.
As Brad said, though, if people tell you they want to annihilate you, believe them.
Right.
Okay, we can't because, and that's why I said before, and we only have a minute. And by the way, thank you so much for being here. I hope you've enjoyed this more than I have. It's been great. As I mentioned before, I think it's just as difficult to have love as it has war, because in the world today of social media, it overwhelms the emotions, and therefore it's almost impossible, not impossible, but almost to break through the morass and to have an Amelia moment. Mm-hmm. Now, I happen to have a dear spot in my heart for the name Amelia. Not from Amelia Earhart, even though she was great. My auntie Mimi, her real name was Amelia, but she was Mimi, and she was the essence of love. I mean, I'm crying even mentioning her name. I love it.
Well, I'd like to. I just kind of like to leave your audience with something. We talked about my situation when I was 16, and that was a long time ago. And if you're ever dealing with something like that, and it seems like there is no other side. Trust me, there is another side. You will get better. You will get happier. My father's favorite expression actually was, "This too shall pass." And I think those are the wisest words I've ever heard, both the good and the bad. So enjoy the good. And if you're in a bad spot in your life, don't despair. You believe in yourself, find the love, because it will get better. And I've had a wonderful life.
And may it continue for many years, as we say, to age of 120. And this too shall pass is Solomon and in the Bible. So again, thank you. So again, you tuned in conscientiously to the joy of living with your humble host, Barry Shore, and our wonderful guest, Brad Schaefer. And on this show, as you know, the reason you tuned in is because you care the most of the whole world about you. YOU, which is great, because when you care about you become the best you possible. You make the world a better place. You can live with purpose. That's the number one fundamental of life. Number two, go mad. Go make a difference. Number three, uncover the power and the secrets of everyday words and terms. WWW, what a wonderful world. Smile, seeing miracles in life every day. As my 8-year-old niece says, seeing miracles in everyday life. Create the kind of world you want to live in, causing rethinking, enabling all to excel. Use the two most powerful words in the English language 3 times a day, consciously and conscientiously. Thank you. To harmonize and network kindness. You do all that, you will be healthier, happier, and wealthier. I guarantee it, or your money back. And of course, since we live in the positive, purposeful, powerful world, use 4-letter words like life, love, live, grow, hope, free, play, pray, and tell everybody F you. Remember to add right away, capital N, capital N. It's a great 4-letter word. F-U, capital N, capital N. And we're going to share with you and leave you with a blessing. As Brad said, this too shall pass. And the good blessing is, go forth. Live exuberantly. Spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad. Go make a difference.